It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Amy Shamroe. Hi, Amy. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing fine, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Nice to have you here. As we were talking about just before we got on, you are the director of the Independent Publisher Book Awards. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, now what is the criteria for somebody? They can't come through one of the big five, is that it? So they have to be self-published or boutique published?
Exactly. So you can't be part of the big five, and it can be self-published. You can come through a university press, and there's even smaller publishers, kind of like you're saying, boutique, that are putting out titles, but they're not maybe the biggest publishers you've seen. Maybe all the titles aren't out, in your airport or at the, main display at the big chain bookstore. So we get to really dig in and find some of the best books out there that maybe aren't with the best, with agents and have produced 100 titles already. So, for the author. So it's a really great field to be in, I think.
Well, the statistic that I saw was that there are 2.2 million published books on Amazon.
Yeah, it's an amazing and astounding figure, because I think people kind of, and there's nothing wrong with it, but we see a lot of the same authors being promoted, right? You see Nora Roberts, James Patterson, and a few others, and they're all great authors. They know what they're doing. They know how to hit their audience. But there's so many more out there that you can dig into and explore, and so many more stories being told. And that's really what we do, is we highlight the people who are writing those books and doing it well, and we honor them with awards.
So you're not actually publishing people's work?
No, we do not publish. We take everybody's submissions and find the best of the best.
Okay, that was my next question. How did people get to you? So they have to submit to you?
They do have to submit to us. We have a little bit of a gatekeep, because as it is right now, we get thousands of entries a year. So if we didn't have any kind of a gatekeeping on it, we'd probably just have, our whole office would be filled with books wall to wall. So there is a little bit of a process, but we try not to make it too expensive or too egregious. And, we really just love seeing what's out there and love hearing from people. We've met some really fascinating people. I've been with the company, or the award, for 15 years. It's wrapping up it's in year 28 right now. So we've got a long record behind us of a lot of fascinating people.
How do you guys make money on this? Or do you?
We do, to a point. There's a submission fee. So I have a mortgage to pay just like everybody else.
Right.
And I have a 2-person team. But it's a pretty modest. We do 3 different price breaks to kind of encourage people so they don't all arrive at the end of the cycle. And it's anywhere from $75 to $95. So for under $100, people can enter the award. Okay,
you mentioned gatekeeper. What are the criteria to submit?
Certainly, a great question. So we have about 90 regular categories. We also have special categories for ebooks, and we have special categories for regions around the world. And so depending on the category is the criteria, but as a whole, right now, for example, we're looking for books that were published between 2022 and 2024. Because of the nature of independent publishing, it's not like regular publishing where you have a spring collection and a fall collection or anything like that. So we do kind of have a little bit of a broader couple-year window, but any books produced in that time, challenge somebody. They can even email me and say, I don't see a category for my book on here, but there's always, one of our categories always fits whatever type of book is out there.
So what about genres? You take any genre?
Yeah, we have special categories for everything from historical fiction to literary fiction. We have biographies, autobiographies, medicine, and current events, history, both U.S. and world. And what we do with these is you send them to us, but we have judges all around the world that are specialty in these categories. So for something like medical, it's not going to be a librarian judging it. It's going to be a doctor who's going to have some insight onto the topics at hand. So we do for maybe fiction and some other categories that maybe are more up those alleys. We do have booksellers and people who have retired from publishing, people who have retired from academia helping us judge. So we have a whole field of judges that are specialized in the categories. So we're able to offer a category for pretty much every type of book you can imagine, fiction and nonfiction.
So how many of these do you award in a year?
So it depends on the year, but we do gold, silver, and bronze. And sometimes there's a tie. We try not to do too many. So at the most, there might be occasionally a double tie, so 5 per category and 90 categories plus. So, you know, there's a few hundred, but again, we're covering quite a few genres. So there's a lot of competition. Not everybody wins, but there's a good field that where when people do win, they know that they're kind of the cream of the crop. And so that, I think, is what appeals to a lot of people who have done their own books or smaller presses and want the attention, but also want it to mean something that they won. Okay.
Do you have different, what's the word I'm looking for? Elimination round, I guess, for lack of a better term.
It's great question. Yeah, so some awards will say they were a finalist. We only do the gold, silver, and bronze, but we do have elimination rounds. So there's always a first look when we're getting ready to send the books out to judges. And unfortunately, sometimes we find some there that are, you know, the first paragraph is one run-on sentence, or there's some major grammatical errors that we'll catch right away. And then as it goes through the process with the judges, more and more of it gets read, and then it kind of comes down more to then really nuanced points about structure and originality and use of language. So there are these different stages. It's a great question. It's not, everybody sits down with a pile and just starts reading for weeks on end. But there are some criteria that we have to ensure that they are good books. And so that is part of the weeding out process, as it were. But we don't put seals or medals on people's books if they're not one of the gold, silver, or bronze winners.
Okay. What's something that you can give as advice to new authors? In other words, don't do this or you will be eliminated immediately.
That's a great question. And I think with the rise of independent publishing and some of these newer titles that are coming out, I think this is something that is a great question to ask in any format. So first and foremost, your spouse, best friend, or whomever is never going to be a good editor for you. So hire a professional editor. Don't do it yourself, or have somebody who likes you do it, because they're going to read your story and you need somebody to read for your content. Look for those typos or the, errant apostrophe, things like that. I think that's the number one thing I see, that people don't always go for the professionals. They have a team with them, and teams are great for initial ideas. They can help you along. They can inspire you, but you need a professional to sometimes come in and be kind of the hatchet man to go through and take out sentences that don't make sense or grammatical errors and things like that. That's probably the big number one.
What were you doing before this? Were you a publisher or a writer before this?
I actually worked in bookselling. So I worked in bookstores, so I kind of saw it from the other side. And, I think that's what's been so interesting about being in this field for about 20 years now, is the evolution of books and literature in general. So being on the bookseller side for years, I was able to kind of really keep an eye on the trends of what types of books people were really enjoying, what were the best sellers, what book clubs were reading, things like that. So that's always informed a lot of the work on once I joined the awards. And there was a bit of time where I overlapped between the two. And I continue to try and keep an eye on that pulse, not to say that a book has to be written following, the trend right now of Nantucket beach reads for the summer or something, whatever the trend might be for that month or period, or what's on TikTok, which is all part of the trend, but it helps to know where people are at for reading, to know that you're awarding relevant books. So I think so my past in book selling really allowed me to start down this path and really help to inform. So it's not quite as myopic as working in publishing, because I think when you're too deep into any particular industry, sometimes you can lose the forest for the trees. So having been able to see how that plays out with people actually buying the books was a really great experience.
So you're also doing a podcast called Behind the Cover. And are these guests that you have on your podcast the ones that have been awarded the Independent Publisher Book Awards?
Yeah, several have been Independent Publisher Book Award winners. Others have won other awards. So we've had people who have won Business Book Awards and Children's Book Awards and other award-winning authors, really. But again, not that we're against it, but we haven't been tracking down National Book Award winners or anything like that. And it's not that we wouldn't talk to them, but the podcast is another way for us to, I feel like, talk to and really amplify and give a little space for these authors who are doing good work and have really creative stories behind them that really just don't get told in a lot of arenas.
How many book awards are there?
Well, so it's really interesting. I went to a online kind of seminar a couple months ago, and somebody who helps authors find book awards informed us that there were over 5,000 book awards in the world right now. So,
oh my God,
a lot more than I ever would have guessed.
Is there one that's considered like the best, like the Oscar of books?
Well, first you get into National Book Award, Pulitzer, for kids and young adults, the Newbery and the Caldecott, things like that are really well-known institutional ones. So those are always out there. Those tend to be won by the major publishers. We have a kind of a rival but friendly, I think, there's the Ben Franklin Awards, which are put out by the IPPY, which is the Independent Publisher Book Association. Now, you have to be a member of that association to enter, but that's been around for a very long time. They know what they're doing. And I'll toot our own horn here that Independent Publisher Awards, we were the first and we're the largest unaffiliated for independent publishing. And, we had a award ceremony a few years ago where one of our authors said, well, you guys are like the Sundance of book awards. So you're not the Oscars. We're like the Sundance or the indie kind of. There's a couple others that are out there that have longevity. I think that's the key if anybody's thinking about entering awards is, check them out. Sometimes they're put on by publishing associations. I know Colorado has its own state publishing association, and they award their own books within the state. That's an established thing. But, some I think have figured out that this is something you can do and award everybody a medal or do these finalist things and everybody gets a sticker, and they've maybe been around for, 5 years or fewer than 10. And, everybody can enter. If you just want a sticker, that's what you can do. But if you want, an award that's gone through a process and you can kind of feel good about being at the top of the heap coming out of it, there's a few that are on par with us that have been around for 20, 25, 30 years.
Well, I guess on that, we should kind of wind this down. Thanks so much for coming on. Do you have a website you want to give out?
Sure. It's www.IPPYAwards.com, and that's where you can find out past winners and find some great reads. If you're interested in writing or in entering your book, the information's there. And, if you're working on a book, you can always email me, and I'm happy to chat. I've been in the industry for years and happy to always throw a couple of words of advice out there if anybody wants them.
Do you have a maximum number that you take in a year?
No, we don't actually. So we're always welcoming books, and we're always looking for trends. We change categories every few years if we see something's not, getting published like it used to be, and something new has risen up, and so we always adapt and change as well. So we're not looking to give everybody an award because they enter, but we want to make sure that we're representing what people are reading right now too.
Okay, great. Well, Amy, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was nice talking to you, and this was informative. I didn't know that you guys existed, so I'm happy to have learned something today. Again, you said the website is IPPY Awards, IPPYAwards.com?
Yep, exactly. Thank you.
Well, best of luck with what you're doing. When do you usually award the awards?
Sure. We usually award them in May of every year.
Oh, okay.
So right now they're open for submissions. We've got last year's winners up if people want to check out and look for a new read, but we're open. The final deadline is usually in March, and then we take a few months to kind of get everything out to the judges and get all of that going, and we then announce the winners. And again, it's everything from a few different fiction categories, a lot of nonfiction. We have audiobook categories, ebook categories, and even categories that honor books that emphasize certain regions from around the world.
You must get hundreds of submissions, yeah?
We do get thousands, actually.
Thousands.
So, it's not like overwhelming. We're not all being buried in books, but we do get usually a few thousand awards submissions every year. And like we said, the few that kind of don't follow the rules, we can get rid of easily, but it can be a very long and arduous process and a tough process for our judges. Sometimes it's, it comes down to just narrow margins of whether somebody places in a medal or not, and it's really tough when you have to do that, but it's also really great to see that kind of quality out there with these smaller presses and independent publishers.
Okay, well, thank you again for coming on, and best of luck with your work.
Thanks, Douglas. Have a great day.